Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm going to open our Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee meeting for Wednesday the 12th of August, just with some housekeeping for the benefit of the public gallery. This meeting is being recorded and that recording has started now and will be publicly available on the Council's website. Health and safety requirements for the conference and function centre. Obviously things are changing as we go today, but the COVID tracing information is at the front desk and hand sanitising equipment is there as well. We ask that people avail themselves of that, even though it doesn't become strictly necessary till lunchtime. Male and female toilets are located on the ground floor and first floor of the venue. There are independent disabled toilets on each floor as well. This is a non-smoking facility. A first aid kit is available. A defibrillator is also available on the ground floor foyer next to the toilets. Please make yourselves aware of the exits and evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, we'll exit through the nearest exit door and assemble in front of the building, or if we go out the back, in the car park at the rear. If we need to follow instructions, then we'll follow the guidance of our committee administrators. Councillors in person today, put your hands up if you wish to speak. If we do have people joining remotely, which I'm not sure if we do or don't at this stage, then if you're remote, please use the hands up function on Teams. And councillors, presenters, please give your names before speaking and direct your question to who might be expected to answer it so they know to tune in, especially if they're remote. I'll take apologies for arts, culture and heritage. Are there any? Councillor Lou Finlay. Any others? So I will move those. Oh, Councillor Beattie. Councillor Beattie for early departure, please. That I will move that those apologies be received. Seconded by Councillor Hancock. Thank you. We will vote on that. We have our electronic voting thingamies. The apologies are accepted unanimously, and I will now adjourn Arts, Culture and Heritage until the close of the Planning and Strategy meeting and hand over to the Chair, Councillor Rutherford. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Ki te mana whenua, rangitane, he mihi nui, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning and welcome to Planning and Strategy. We have got a very full day ahead of us. We're going to get right into it with apologies, and we've got an apology from Councillor Finlay. Are there any other apologies? The Deputy Mayor? Councillor Beattie? Councillor Beattie for early departure. We've got an apology for lateness from the Deputy Mayor. Great, I will move those, seconded by Councillor Hancock, and I will invite you to vote. Great, that has carried 100%. Now moving on to additional items. I haven't had any notification. Great. Are there any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I please declare my interest for item 7, the deputation from Homes for People?
Thank you. No others? Moving on to public comment. Is there any public comment today? Great, moving right on to hearing of submissions for the future use of Huia Street Reserve. So with, just for all submitters to note who are here presently, we've got our traffic light system, which is allowing you for 10 minutes to speak. So it'll be 7 minutes on green, 2 minutes on orange and 1 minute on red. Please, if you have questions, ensure that you allow time within your 10 minutes for that. We have got a order which we are going to try to stick to, but if there are any submitters who are running late and there are other members, other submitters already present, we will jump down and try to keep moving through our list. So first up, we have got submitter number 67, Alec Mackay.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this hearing this morning. I put an apology in for my wife, Lynn. She's busy away with the staff having to think about what happened last night in terms of the business going forward. And look, as a resident, firstly, I'd like to just applaud the council for, as a resident of Park Road in Palmerston North, on that piece of land on the corner of Park and Fitzherbert Ave. It's really been sad to see it just unattended, uncared for, and inaccessible to the public for a long time. I think that goes back probably at least a decade, if not longer. Look, as a resident, well aware of the foot and car traffic on that part of Park Road. I think this morning was an example. I usually go to work before 8. I try to get out of the house at 8:30 this morning, traffic all the way down to the Lido. Trying to feed into Fitzherbert Ave, trying to get out across the bridge. I'm also really conscious of the amount of foot traffic that's in that area. But really putting that aside, and that's not probably our objection to options 1, 2 and 5. I suppose our objection is to changing the designation of that area from the Hui Reserve. And so we really just wanted to front up this morning to just show our support for developing that as a reserve. So that's all I had to say this morning, and also to just encourage that process of looking how we use it as a reserve for our community, how that process is advanced and advance quickly. So thank you.
Thank you, Alec. I've just got a question to start off with, because in your submission you made a comment around there's too few green spaces left in the city, and one of the I guess arguments that's come through is the fact that Onley Park and the Esplanade are right next door essentially. Have you got any thoughts on proximity around your comments?
I don't think we can have too few green spaces. We have too few in the city now, and sadly we changed the designation of one area to deal with another issue, and I think it's a death by 1,000 slashes. We're just going to essentially erode away. We'll find another good reason, and a very good reason. I think about Coronation Park, a good reason to put a bit of parking in, so we lost a little bit of Coronation Park parking. And at the time, a very sound decision, but we'll always find a reason for using some of these reserves for other purposes. I think at some point we have to put a line in the sand. I suppose an area that I'm very familiar with is a loss of highly productive land, versatile and elite soils from around our cities. That's been slowly occurring for a long time. We put lines in the sand and then we find reasons for moving that line.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Alec. You just said that there was too much traffic and foot traffic on that corner this morning. How do you relate with your proposal or your submission with that traffic? Don't you think that if we agree with you, it will increase more traffic and more foot traffic on that area?
I think that's to some degree that's a separate issue. Just the traffic flows from that part of the city. But again, our main reason for the submission today is to actually make sure that we preserve that as a reserve for the future of the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Alec, for your submission. I just wondered if you were around in the city when a previous council attempted to sell the reserve land there.
Yes, we've been residents since '99, and obviously I was born and bred in Palmerston. I've just back read what happened back then. That's about as much as I know, but I applaud the council for putting this out and having public consultation and giving the community actually a chance to make comment on what's on those 5 options. And we're in support of maintaining it as a reserve.
If I could just follow up on your comments that you made initially, you said that you'd like to see it developed. So you're not advocating for it to be left as it is, but you'd like to see it developed further as a reserve, as a reserve facility. Is that your
Definitely,
yeah.
And I think it needs to that needs to be an active process. I think we've commented that there's Palmerston North Girls High is close by. There's a play centre. There's also other green spaces around there. It's a feature for Turbot Ave. It's a major arterial route in the city, so it's something that could be a feature of the city into the future as well. But again, I think it needs to be driven by as a reserve and developed as a reserve for community.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The most recent question was mine as well.
Councillors, are there any other questions? Thank you, Alec, for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time. Next up is submission number 6, which is the Railway Land Action Group. And we've got Marilyn, Bruce and Larry speak to us. So councillors, a copy of the notes from Marilyn and Bruce have been circulated, and so you should have those in front of you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors, members of the public and staff. My name is Marilyn Bullock, and along with Bruce Bullock, we're to speak on the matter, and I shall pass you over to Bruce. We're speaking on behalf of the Railway Land Action Group. You'll have a copy in front of you, and you'll have 2 copies, a personal one from ourselves, so just make sure you get the right copy. It's got Railway Land Action Group on the top front left. So I'll now pass you over to Bruce, who will address what we've written.
Good morning, Council. The first page of our Railway Land Action Group submission is the same as our main submission that's in your agenda, and so I won't read that in full, but I just point out at the middle of the page it says we support the following options. Option 3, develop for recreational purposes, and option 4, consider proposals for the community to use the site for a recreational, cultural or community purpose. And moving on to page 2 of our oral submission, and this is new material, the Railway Land Action Group has been lobbying for the preservation of public green space in Palmerston North since 1992, 28 years ago, too long. Having to constantly lobby against the sale or otherwise disposal of public parks and reserves is something we would prefer not to have to do. Too often public green spaces are seen as being a convenient source of revenue. Once you have lost these spaces, they are gone for good and never replaced. In the words of the song, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. For a few of us, this is Groundhog Day. That is history repeating itself. On the 26th of July 2007, a few of us, including Marilyn and Bruce Bullock, John Bent and Pat Kelly, travelled to Wellington to argue our case before the Parliamentary Local Government and Environment Select Committee. We were opposed to the passage of the Palmerston North Reserves Empowering Amendment Bill, which would have allowed the lifting of the reserve status on what was then known as the Bowling Club land on the corner of Park Road and Turbot Avenue. This would then have allowed the disposal of the land to build a petrol station, perhaps. Fortunately, to cut a long story short, we were successful in our mission. So once again, we find ourselves arguing for the preservation of this public green space. It is no surprise that this day has come, as we all always suspected that it would be a case of the council biding its time for another attempt at its disposal. This time the council has learnt its lesson and is going out to consult on the use of the land in the document entitled Future Use of the Helier Street Reserve, before any move to ask the local Member of Parliament to table a bill before the House. Never mind that this part of the Esplanade complex once had a use, being the site of the bowling club rooms, well-used pétanque courts, bowling greens, lawn, trees and shrubbery. But due to a deliberate ploy by the council, through its actions and inactions, the land is now seen as derelict. This is a shameful situation. 5 options and analysis are presented for the public to comment on, but the consultation document is highly biased towards the council's preferred option of enabling the sale or development of the land for housing. Many people have commented on the unsuitability of the site for housing, given the nature of this extremely congested corner site, congested by heavy traffic volume and by surrounding houses. Of course, there is pressure on available land for housing due to many causes, but there is no reason to sacrifice valuable public parks. Another argument for the disposal of the so-called Helier Street Reserve is the presence of the adjacent Only Park, Manawatu Park. These tracts of land are very different in nature, being manicured open sports field. The former bowling club land is of a more intimate local park, serving nearby residents and any passers-by looking for a quiet spot in which to relax or exercise. Palmerston North was originally a natural clearing surrounded by bush and swamp. This 800 acres, known as the Papioya Clearing, was surveyed as a township in 1866, with streets laid down and boundaries of public and native reserve also fixed. Thanks to the perseverance of a later mayor, Mr. Nelson, 371 acres adjoining the Manawatu River was vested in the council as a park and botanic gardens in 1890. Ever since this time, these acres have been eaten away. And we attached to our submission to page 3, which is a excerpt from the book, Palmerston North: A Centennial History by G.C. Peterson. Thank you very much.
Oh, and I'd just like to add in the mission, in the audience we have Larry Haste and Peter Wheeler, who are also members of the Railway Land Action Group.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Marilyn, for that last comment, because that is my question, just for information. How many people does the Railway Land Action Group represent in this submission?
We've been in kind of sleep mode for the last 29 years. We have a core committee that keeps rolling over. I think some of us have died off, to be quite frank, over that period of time. So I couldn't put we're an incorporated society, but we've got a fairly loose structure, so we can't actually define members.
But if you had to put a ballpark figure on it, are we fewer than 10, more than 100? Where does this sit?
Well, we just used to have a database of supporters, put it that way. So it's I mean, in the past we've had a petition on the railway land. We had 13,000 signatures. So for green space. So you're getting back to your question. I don't think I could put a figure on it.
And so that petition on the railway land with 13,000 signatures, when was that? Was that the 29 years ago?
Yeah, 1993.
1993.
Yes.
And you think since then some of those people are likely to have, well, gone. You said died, yes. or moved away, gone in other ways. So, but
yes.
So when you put together a submission on behalf of the Railway Land Action Group, how is that ratified by that group?
Well, we just normally send it out to our committee members. So, and we often don't worry about the supporters too much.
Okay. So how many people are on that committee of members that you send it out to?
6 or 7.
6 or 7. Thank you very much.
Yes, we're pretty much in sleep mode, like I say.
Understood, but thank you. That provides some idea as to the weight we give the submission. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Marilyn and Bruce. I'm just interested in your point about the difference between the green space that's available in Longley Park and the green space that could be available in the Huia Street Reserve. So you said that you thought it could be a quiet space for people, but we know it's in a very busy traffic area. So how do you envisage that space being developed?
Well, actually, we've addressed that matter in our personal submission. Just difficult to know. Option 4 was to go out to the public and see how they wanted the land used, but basically to keep it as a public park, fairly informal. Well, maybe you could have formal elements.
Okay, so you don't have a fixed view on the development so long as it
No.
remains as a recreation park space?
Yes,
Okay.
perhaps from a, yep.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Right, I don't think we've got any further questions. So that concludes the submission from the Railway Land Action Group. And obviously your personal submission is up next, submission number 7. So we will reset the timer and you're welcome to start.
So this is our personal submission, Marilyn and Bruce Bullock. And it's stated in our submission, we support the following option: development for recreational purposes or consider proposals from the community, etc. We recently visited this former bowling club site on the 31st of July and found the site as derelict looking as ever. We had previously visited the site in the past summer. The only change was the presence of a man living in an old shed adjoining the park, adjoining Park Road. He said hello in a friendly manner. The time of day was 2:15, mid-afternoon. What we did notice was the terrible racket from the continuous stream of traffic on the corner of the land adjoining Fitzherbert Avenue. Also, an unseen health hazard at the site would be an air pollution from vehicles, especially diesel particulates. This corner site is elevated about half a metre from the adjoining surrounding land. As we moved towards the back of the site, towards Huia Street, we noticed that it was much quieter, probably due to distance and the surrounding vegetation. We did notice some interesting varieties of camellias which in flower, but struggling to survive. At the rear, you step down into what was the former bowling greens. These former greens are surrounded by a low concrete wall, as the land, we think, was designed to be flooded. There are some concrete remnants of seating remaining. We believe that the land had its own water supply. We then went on to visit the Rose Garden in the Esplanade, which was looking a bit bare, being winter time. What we did notice was the contrast with the Huia Street site. The Park Road, Fitzherbert Avenue land being surrounded by housing, and the girls' high school building is a much more intimate and smaller site. The Esplanade is vaster in area and more open in nature, with a backdrop of large mature trees. You could get lost there. In our support for option 4, we envisaged a possible landscaping scenario for the area and have outlined this in our submission. We noticed a very large variety of camellia plantings surrounding the Rose Garden as they were flowering at this time of the year. This theme of displaying a multitude of camellia varieties could be carried through to Huia Street site. They grow well here and provide shelter. Just moving over to the second page. In fact, someone reminded me there was Camellia House nearby who actually did a submission in 2006 to the Select Committee when the bill went through. The existing totara trees could be retained along the park road boundary to provide a shelter, and more could be planted. The corner site could be used to plant heritage roses in plots, as we previously suggested. They could also be viewed from the roadway. The rear of the site could be planted in a more rustic manner, with an emphasis on features that appeal to young children in particular. It is important that young people get out into the open air from the confines of their homes to let off energy. They also expose themselves to sunlight and improve their immunity to illness. In days gone by, rickets was a problem due to a lack of sunshine and hence vitamin D, or due to lack of vitamin D. As you well know, the world has dramatically changed since this matter went out for public consultation in November 2019. A coronavirus pandemic changed our world, and we were confined to our homes and immediate neighbourhood in late March, April and part May. People and their dogs were out in their droves, walking the streets and exploring their neighbourhood. They discovered nooks and crannies they did not know previously existed. They met their neighbours and said hello to passing strangers. Air pollution and traffic noise was down. A whole new world was discovered. The neighbourhood once again became important, so we need our parks. Any sale of this reserved land in this long-established neighbourhood would deprive the local residents of an asset. This also includes local school pupils and attendees at the nearby preschool. Fitzherbert Avenue was in the national news in 1993 when activists campaigned for the retention of the existing line of plane trees when the road was widened. The activists lost and the trees were cut down. In 2013, under the euphemistically called property review, vacant land on the corner of Hardy Street was on a long list of public land to be sold. This plot was subsequently withdrawn from sale due to public opposition. And a few more points. Some people need to be aware that any proceeds from a possible sale of the Hewier Street lot are required by legislation to be spent on acquiring other reserves or for the development of other reserves. Some people think that you can just use this money to cut rates. Others eye up the proceeds for their own pet projects in another part of town. And in regard to option 4 proposals for use by the community, Hewier Street, along with the rest of the Esplanade, is protected under the Palmerston North Reserves Act 1922. This act lays out what the council can do with the land, including leasing it to groups for playing of outdoor games. Workers' cottages can be built on the land. Legally, a management plan is not required, and the more recent Reserves Act 1970 requires such a plan, but perhaps one could still be implemented here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've just got a question to start off. In your opening comments, you identified noise, a large volume of traffic and air pollution from vehicles, and then made a suggestion that the site should be planted to encourage young children to be there, and those seem to contradict each other a little bit. I wondered if you could expand on those
Yes,
comments.
in our original submission, we laid out a possible scenario for the land, basically dividing it into 4 lots, 2 front lots and 2 rear lots. And it's basically the bit on the corner of Park Road and Fitzherbert Avenue that it's extremely noisy. And Bruce and I envisaged that maybe you could plant something like roses, so you wouldn't necessarily have children playing there. But the noise as you went towards the back of the site was dramatically reduced, and being sheltered by trees and shrubs, which at the moment are pretty derelict.
So your suggested area for, if it was developed for a place that children would play, would be one of the back lots away from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
We recognise that problem.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Maybe a question for staff. In the submission, it says see attached design, but certainly electronically, I don't see any design attached to the submission. Is that available?
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. We will follow that up and ensure that all of the attachments that were provided with the submission are circulated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know that we did have an attachment there, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So there was Councillor Johnson's just identified that you referenced an attachment, a design that you had done for the lot. but it wasn't attached. Was there the intention to attach
it may
that?
have been written down. Yes, I think what we laid out. No, maybe we didn't get round to doing one. Maybe that's what happened.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really for clarification, when you mentioned that the Fitzherbert Avenue trees in 93 got nationwide news coverage, you mentioned that they got cut down, but my understanding was that every tree that could was relocated to the railway land. Was that true?
No, they were cut down. There might have been one that was taken out to the church at a Cout tree.
Okay, no, that's okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yes, no.
Thank you. I know it's a side point, but I just thought keep history accurate. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Marilyn, and thanks, Bruce. Just wanted to follow up on your point made around proceeds from any sale or development of this reserve being contained to a similar purpose around reserves, and just wanted to see if you had a further specific view around what sort of reserves that should be focused on, given that this is quite an open space reserve, but obviously our city reserves portfolio includes some quite built up reserves and some more open space type reserves.
Yes, so this is assuming that the land is sold, is it?
Correct.
Yeah. Yes. Well, often proceeds end up in the arena because it's a reserve and you see nothing for it. That's often happened in the past. The railway land, for example, where the warehouse is, that went into a black hole, the proceeds from that, although it wasn't a reserve. But and the difficulty is if you were to find other land in the inner city, it would be extremely difficult and expensive. I mean, there's an area up near the hospital that's certainly lacking in green space. I suppose some of that money has often been spent out at a country way, developing. Well, I don't know that there has been any more recent sales of public land. So maybe it's not really a scenario that's happened, but
thanks for
certainly
that
other green space.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There don't seem to be any other questions. So I appreciate you taking the time to come in this morning. Our next submission is submission number 9 from Environment Network Manawatu, and we've got Stuart and Alistair coming to speak to us. Good morning. You are welcome to make a start when you're ready.
Is this on? Yes. Thank you, everyone, for hearing our submission. ENM has submitted in favour of option 4, as we're concerned that the public would love to have a real say in the possibilities for this very conspicuous, potentially fabulous site. Our members have been seriously underwhelmed by the options favoured in the document presented. Since the options were prepared last year and submissions drafted between then and February, a lot has happened. There has been a mighty shift, we are told, in how many people relate to each other and to our environment. I have, over many years, served on council working parties with particular input on the consultation process. And in this instance, I note the following. The submissions in favour of retaining reserve status and public ownership were 47. In favour of housing generally were 29, with 2 appearing to want both and 2 wanting neither. This would suggest that those who actually recognised Huia Street, when no one I spoke to knew where it was, are sending a clear message to council. I believe if the land had been called Fitzherbert and Park Road Corners, there may have been many more submissions. People are just not happy that since 2002, the land has been neglected. That even led some in desperation to say, just get on with it. I think desperation is not a good place from which to make good decisions. I also note that in the summary and analysis, it does not state the numbers as above, the 47 in favour of retaining the reserve status and public ownership, and the 29 in favour of some sort of housing. Nor does it mention some of the useful comments. For example, the people agreed to housing if there was no other available land. It does not state that people might multiply, but land doesn't. It doesn't mention the loss of opportunity if land goes out of public ownership. Nor does it mention, as one of the submitters said, that this is a great place for us to show our multicultural identity and, in fact, to celebrate it. Nor, for that matter, that they thought that the buildings were just plain ugly. Also, I noted that E&M, the Environment Network Manawatu, has 55 environment groups, and we've always shown that we are keen and eager to be involved in things that relate to the environment and green spaces, but we're not shown as stakeholders. Enough reserved land has been whittled away. This land is ours. We have high hopes for it, as shown in the many suggestions and the submissions. I have my own list right here with me, and I believe the people of Palmerston North will not tolerate any further action towards removing the reserve status, nor throwing good money after bad in intensive housing plans for this special site. Contrary to the statement in council documents, I would say that the community has decided that this land on the corner of Park and Fitzherbert is required for community and recreational purposes, and that those will be entirely different from Ongley Park and the Esplanade, and in fact anywhere else in the city. It will not be another petrol station, because we've got enough of those on corners of Fitzherbert Avenue, and it will not be an unattractive intensive building site. We envisage an interesting, welcoming, sheltered place suited to rest and discovery that would be fitting to a city of 90,000 people, which identifies as an eco-city. The council needs to have faith in the community and in the artistic and talented people in it. They could workshop the many ideas that people have, and our members would be very pleased to be active in that process. You know, we can do this. That's me.
Thank you, Stuart. Alistair, did you have any comments to add?
The only thing that I'll add from what Stuart said too as well is, as you read in our submission, we believe that the environment sector potentially has a community purpose that would be very fitting of that site. We certainly have talked to council before about an environment centre for the city that it is currently lacking. We have talked about the fact that we would really like a green space with some space to be able to build on that. We would love to incorporate open space into that design and really work with the community to actually decide exactly how that might look, so they get the benefits of all of the things that have been discussed so far in the submissions. And look, that's as much as I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question is from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Alistair. We had a mission that one of the previous submitters was in a sleep mode in terms of their action around this. Why haven't we heard from you before about this?
Grant, you know we're not in a sleep mode.
No, I know that. I know that. But we haven't heard. I haven't heard from you about this site before until now.
We have submitted on it before.
When?
When did we submit on it before?
I think that we've just talked. I think that we've just talked quite generally about environment centre, a place and space where we could go. We haven't quite specifically talked about this site so much, though actually we have talked with council officers and with other councillors too as well at times about potential for this site. Haven't talked directly with you, but certainly I think that this has kind of been ruminating in the background for a while. Certainly would have loved to have been at the table pre this happening.
We've got 4 reserves or parks, a couple within 50 metres of this site. So Wallace Park, Awatea, Ongley, the Esplanade, which is 26 hectares. Your view on another one within 50 metres?
Yes, but we don't really envisage this as being a park, as any park that we have, as I said. There are so many other things that communities can do. I see this more as something, some of the suggestions that I've written here, I mean, you saw the comments that people have made, but, when we built Wild Base, for example, we took out the scented garden, and I saw people crying when they saw that had gone. We keep talking about resilience in the city. This is a perfect place for planting fruit trees. There is mention about the soil maybe is contaminated, but there's so many treatments of things like with mushroom compost. We know that sort of thing can be dealt with. In fact, there's community gardens growing on ex-contaminated sites in many places around the country. The idea of picnic tables and seatings and little areas that are set aside, like, for example, in Paris, you'll see things like wildflower areas with a beehive and it fenced off with a little picket fence. And there's so many beautiful examples of what we could do. And on the issue of the corner being noisy and all sorts of things, well, the beautiful totara hedge could very easily be replaced within the new boundary, which would completely mute the noise and deal with the issue of any contaminants there. And we can build around the existing trees. So it could be a place of just many little nooks of fascination. And I just know there's people in the city who would just delight in being part of bringing all those design features together and workshopping those ideas, as we have done, for example, on things like when the Lido was redeveloped. That was a great process, and I was part of that and really enjoyed such a diverse group of people contributed to something quite new, and we had a lot of community input in that process.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, final question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you both for speaking to the submission. I'm just trying to understand the specific point of view around the designation of land independent of your interests around an EnviroHub. So as a hypothetical, if you had just received the keys to a beautiful EnviroHub somewhere else in the city that met all your needs, what would be your specific view on the future of this piece of land?
It would still be as a community park, as a more intimate space, because it's already sheltered, and there's not a place where people just go and hover. And as I said, in this COVID scenario, people love to gather and to collect as families to do things. So, as a picnic site. And yes, if we had, we're not seeing this necessarily as somewhere for an EnviroHub, but that is an option, that even if it was for removable buildings for that purpose, it's in some place. It was one of the many ideas. It certainly didn't define ours. I'd also like to say something with regard to Marilyn's presentation on behalf of the Railway Land Action Group, that the Environment Network has one of its 55 member groups is the Railway Land Action Group, and we sent their submission out to all of our members. So, we have our 55 member groups with all of their members. So it was circulated more widely than just the committee. And I don't know who else circulated it, but I don't know whether any of those people gave input, but it certainly was circulated.
And I'll just add a quick final comment in there, which is, discounting the fact that there might be another space or another site, one of the beautiful things about this reserve site is its foot traffic, is the fact that so many people see it. It is such a visible site for the community that for leaving it as in community purpose, for a community purpose, and having the community being able to access that site, I think in my mind is one of the critical things. I mean, losing that kind of opportunity, I think, would be a crying shame.
Thank you very much for coming in and presenting to us this morning. That concludes your time for your submission. Our next submission is number 58, Manawatu Tenants Union, and we've got Ben here to speak to us.
Kia ora koutou, thanks for this opportunity to speak on this. Firstly, want to congratulate the council for the work you guys have been doing on increasing our social housing and also looking at ways to address the housing crisis. This proposal is one of those, looking at how council land can be used to address the urgent need we have for housing. So I do want to congratulate that. In our submission, we have two main focuses or issues. The first is public ownership and community ownership of community land, and the second is affordable housing. Housing needs to be affordable to benefit the whole community. What we are concerned about is that option one is to take what is at the moment public land that we can use for the good, whether that's a reserve, whether that's housing or any other purposes, and sell that off so the community no longer has ownership of that, which is not something that we support. And we see there's so much potential to use public land for housing with our own social housing, also in Wellington with their social housing and market rental housing and medium to high density that they've developed over the years, which is a really valuable taonga that benefits many people. The options themselves, we do not support the use of it for commercial purposes or for land banking. And I haven't seen any submissions that did support that either. We don't have a position for or against the use of that for a reserve. And I do want to then talk a little bit more about option one. We've outlined our position on keeping that land in the community, and our preference would be that that land could be used, if that was the most suitable, for social housing or for council built, and if it had to be market rent, affordable rental housing, to keep that in community ownership so we can use that in the longer term. We can develop that as an asset as well. If the council does go ahead with selling off the land in option one, then it would be our strong preference that the council look at any options to ensure that housing would be affordable or at least partly affordable. It's not my area of expertise as around how those conditions could be set in place with the developers, but we would really want to see some steps taken to try and keep the land, the housing or part of it affordable and accessible for the wider community. As well, if there's going to be any income made off that sale, it should be ring-fenced for the further development of council social housing. Affordability, like we've touched on, is one of the main issues facing renters. Over the last few weeks, we've seen tenants who are now getting rent increase notices coming out of the rent freeze and out of the lockdown period. Rent increases for $50, a couple for $100, one the other day, $200 a week rent increase. Almost every single one of these has been legal because the only limit on how much rent can be increased to is market rent. What is the cost for a similar house in the similar area? And that is something that this proposal has failed to address and explore adequately, in our opinion, looking at what are the potential implications of developing high-cost housing. Will it be rental? Will it be ownership models? How will this affect the house prices and moving on to the rent prices in the surrounding area? Those are issues that we would want to see explored as well as a part of this submission. We do have a massive lack of housing. We need more housing urgently in Palmerston North, but we can't lose sight of ensuring that that housing is going to be affordable and taking into account any potential impacts on the price of housing in the surrounding area. That's our submission. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Ben. I've just got a question. Obviously, you've outlined in your written submission that you essentially do not support any of the 5 options presented, but have provided commentary that your preference is for social housing or public housing to be developed on the site. If there was an option of the council developing the site itself for medium density housing and targeting some or all to first home buyers, what would your view be on that?
We would likely support that. I would want to also know if there are any other council land that could be used for those purposes. The proposal said that there was being a review done of council land. It didn't mention whether there were any other potential sites, but we would likely support using council land such as Huia Street Reserve if necessary for affordable medium density housing.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Ben, for your submission. I'm just wanting to clarify what you mean by community ownership, because you've talked a little bit about council developing it and you've talked about private ownership. When you talk about community ownership, are you meaning, it would be good to have a clear understanding of what you mean?
So what I mean by that is that the council would maintain ownership of the land, whether that's used as a reserve, whether that is used as social housing.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ben, for your submission. Really appreciate the depth you went into with that. And you've come out strongly in favour of a medium high density housing option, if that's the way, if we look at putting housing on that site. But you'll have seen from the other submissions that we had significant numbers of private individuals submit against medium high density. If they were in favour, it was generally at the lower density options. Some went as far to say that high density would equal a slum type environment. So I wondered if you had a comment particularly on why medium high density would be a good thing for the city rather than the negative view that others have put forward.
Oh, absolutely. Firstly, we've got a housing crisis. We need as many houses as we can get on the land. Secondly, medium density housing can and does work. We see this here in Palmerston North with Homes for People and some of their developments, and also the Lutheran Village are examples of lower end of medium density housing that work really well. Around the rest of the country, high density housing, it can be done well, it is done well, whether that is with the Wellington City Council, Kainga Ora builds that are ongoing. Salvation Army in Auckland has also recently just opened I believe, transitional or long-term housing facility which looks actually quite similar to some of the proposals in there. And I would expect that the council would be more than capable of talking with those other organisations around how can that best be managed and developed.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Ben. Just wanted to get your reaction around the prospect of us ring fencing any development proceeds here off of a reasonably high value site, and then potentially using that to create even more social housing in some other part of the city. What your reaction might be to that?
Yeah, so we said that is not our preference. However, if the council does proceed with option 1, we would like to see in its current form, we would like to see that happen as a way of ensuring that there will be further funding for developing social housing.
So it's not necessarily about getting social housing on that site from your perspective. It's about making sure that there are. It's
about more housing that is affordable, accessible, public in the community, wherever that is.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillors, are there any other questions? Thank you, Ben, for coming in to present your submission this morning. Our next submitter is Chris Teosharel, submission number 62.
Morning, everyone. Good to see you again, and thanks very much for the opportunity. Before I talk about the Park Road site, I would just like to talk to you very briefly about being a good example as leaders in the city. As you know, we've in this city gone to COVID level 2, and other parts of the city are at other parts of the country at level 3. Who knows what the future holds? But what I would say is that around the world, we have seen where strong and positive leadership has had very different effects on the outcome and the experience of the pandemic compared with where there has been poor leadership. So what I would just say in that context then is I would really encourage all of you to wear masks when you are in circumstances like this and at other public places as a way of helping to normalise the wearing of masks. There are many people in our community who feel that it's unnecessary or it's unmanly or it's un-New Zealand-like, but it's been proven around the world where it has been, where it is part of the culture to help prevent infection. And so I'd really plea with you to be good leaders and help to change the norm that exists. So thanks. So talking about Park Road, the process of deciding on the preferred option before putting an idea out for public consultation is, I believe, a poor one, because it gives people little reason to believe that their views will be given fair consideration. It seems like people's minds have already been made up. I know it's only called the preferred option, but my observation is that the preferred option is usually the one that is gone with. Trying to change somebody's mind is nearly always harder than helping somebody to come up with a solution together. So please consider this in future when wanting the public's views on other matters. A number of opponents of the council's preferred option have the view that because the land in question was originally given for a certain purpose, it should remain in use for that purpose. I generally have much sympathy with that view, but in this case believe that the intent of the original gift could be maintained even if it was decided to use the land for residential or commercial purposes. Land was given for recreation of people in Palmerston North at a time when the extent of Palmerston North was tiny compared with today. And I believe that the intent of the donor of the land was to ensure that there was space set aside for residents to undertake physical recreational activities. I do not believe that the intent was for that very piece of land to always be set aside for that purpose, regardless of other changes within the city. Instead, I believe it would be completely in keeping with that intent to use any proceeds from putting the land to alternative uses to the creation of space for recreation in other parts of the land. And Marilyn earlier said that that's actually required under the Act that it's governed by. For many years, it has been identified that the area of the city bordered by Tremaine, North, Ruahine and Featherston streets is substantially lacking in such spaces. And the only way to create it is to purchase some land in that area and convert it from housing into recreational space. Now, there's plenty of old houses there that have virtually no capital value. It's the value of the land, and admittedly, it's not cheap, but any proceeds from the sale of that land on Fitzherbert Park would also be substantial. And in that way, open space could be recreated so that there is no net loss as a result of change of use of Park Road land. Some submitters have said that Park Road land is a very busy, by a very busy, noisy intersection, and that's clearly true, and so it's unsuitable for housing. But in my view, it's actually a reason that it's also rather unsuitable as a location for recreation, especially as a quiet, passive recreational space. There is no doubt, and many submitters I think have recognised, that there is ample recreational space nearby, perhaps more so than in any other location in the city. Some of that is big open space, periodically used for sport, but for the most of the week, relatively free for people to use passively or actively. Some of it is highly built and suited for intense sporting use. Some of it is vegetated and suited to quiet and passive use. There is also the recently developed Riverside area, which wasn't in that state back in the 1890s or whenever this land was given to the city, which provides further open space and offers a great variety of uses. The neighbouring school seemed pretty lukewarm on the council's proposal, but has not said that it actually needs the land for its own use. If it did have such a need, then this too would seem like potentially a valid alternative use, as long as the proceeds were then used according to the Act. Nor has the tennis club indicated that it is bursting at the seams and requires more space. Despite all of the above, I do think it is incumbent on the council, before adopting its preferred option, to actually invite the community to suggest alternative uses. And this consultation did not do that. I do not recall this ever actually happening before, and on only one occasion can I recall an idea coming forth spontaneously, and that was for it to be used as the location of a bonsai garden. With the level of noise mentioned earlier, I can think of few places in the city that would be less suitable for creating the quiet, reflective atmosphere that typifies bonsai gardens. I can vouch that sometime between 2007 and 2013, Environment Network Manawatu and another group raised the prospect of using the land for an environment centre. So I think the best course of action is to adopt option 4, with option 1 as the fallback option. This should be especially effective at bringing ideas out. If ultimately none of those ideas are forthcoming or none of them are considered suitable, then having invited ideas and genuinely given them consideration should aid any case made to change the acts that regulate the use of the land. If after this consideration of ideas for recreational use of the land, it is still decided that land should be used for housing, then please make it the very best example of medium density, eco-friendly, community enriching housing that it can be. Part of the justification for changing the use should be to demonstrate that housing models other than the current standard standalone cookie cutter house is a viable one. It definitely shouldn't be used for 350 square metre sections with a double-storey house and a garage on it, which has become the norm for development of residential brown section sites and has detracted greatly from the city amenity. Many factors make this site a very good location for such a demonstration, and there are many parts of the inner city where it could be replicated as the dwellings there reach the end of life. If this option is ultimately chosen, then to make it a livable place, its outdoor space will need to be protected from the noise of adjacent roads. And this could readily be done by allowing the street edge to be used for commercial purposes such as restaurants, hair salons, etc. Also, given its proximity to the CBD, recreational facilities, Massey, the science centres, and its position on the highest frequency bus route in the city, as well as to keep the price of whatever is built there down, please require that the provision for vehicle parking be made separate from any housing itself. Separate both in physical terms and separate in terms of how it's paid for. So somebody would be able to buy a dwelling or rent a dwelling, but they wouldn't have to buy or rent parking to go with it. This will encourage people who walk, cycle and use public transport to choose to reside there and discourage those people who believe they have to drive everywhere. This would help address some of the concern expressed by some submitters about the increased traffic as a residential development would create. Fortunately, the government has recently required that parking minima be removed from district plans. It's actually a case where the neighbouring land uses require parking for limited periods during the day, and some of this might be used by residents or housing development outside of certain hours and dates. It's actually a good example of what could be complementary land use. One other option that you considered was to leave the land without any particular use being made of it, land banking it. In my mind, that would be a very poor use of resources. That land has sat idle for a very long time now. I would say somewhat deliberately by councils past and present. No, I don't support that. So to conclude, go with option 4 first, give real consideration to the ideas put forward, and if none of them really turn out to be suitable, then go with option 1, but make it the very best example of housing for inner parts and of future housing for inner parts of the city. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chris, for your submission. So you mentioned in there, if we did end up going down the route of using it for housing, do you think that there's enough demand for people who wouldn't necessarily have a car there? How much demand do you think there is for people who would walk or bus as opposed to having a vehicle?
Thanks. I don't know, but I think the last census showed that somewhere of the order of 10% of Palmerston North residents don't have access to a vehicle. And many people in the inner city already don't use vehicles, motor vehicles, very much. So I think times are changing. It's not about saying that everybody has to live like that, but actually today, people who choose to live that way are not very well catered for. So it's actually about increasing the choices that are open for residents about the type of housing that they can live in.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for coming in and presenting your submission to us this morning. Our next submission is number 78, the Manawatu Lawn Tennis Club.
Ready to go? Morning, everybody. Morning, Grant and City Councillors. We love tennis, and we've got a great site down on Fitzherbert Avenue. We're currently New Zealand's Club of the Year, so we're doing some really good things down there. And I guess the proposal is a risk to us. We're a tenant of that land. We have a short-term lease. So this proposal puts us under threat. And that whole piece of land, the Hongley Parkland, presents a fantastic cluster of facilities for this city, along with Massey University and the arena. So we are, as a city, sports central, and any risk around the tennis club obviously affects the whole city. Is this disappearing? It's okay. So our submission has objected to the building of residential property because it puts the tennis club at risk. And we would like assurance from the council that the tennis club has a long-term future on that land. We do consider other options. And one of the key things in terms of developing facilities across the city is to have other income streams. The golf club has been a good example of making them secure, Manawatu Golf Club, by putting in a cafe and a conference facility, etc., to support the income stream for that. So we would support an option that would provide more recreation facilities, which is the purpose of that land. So, for example, recently we have tried a private indoor tennis centre up on Tremaine Ave. But again, that income stream was limited and didn't manage to go ahead. So providing an indoor tennis facility alongside the current tennis facilities, alongside a cafe and a club rooms, provides us with the potential for a long-term future of that land. Currently, the proposal would mean that the new tenants would be faced with tennis balls, noise, lights. We would be faced with increased traffic. There's always a big queue down Park Road, and there's a big queue down Fitzherbert Ave if you have to go into the school. So traffic is going to get worse. So I think there is a potential here to just re-look at that. We understand that land hasn't been used. We understand the commercial nature of that land, but we also understand that its designated use currently is recreation. So I think there's a compromise there potentially, where some of that land maybe could be used for the purposes proposed, but some of that land could maybe be used for enhancing the Club of the Year, which is our tennis club. So that's our submission.
Thank you very much. First question is from the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Andy. And look, we discussed this when you came and saw us, and I put to you at the time, you talked about I think it was really around I suppose the uncertainty about a longer term lease. And did officers get back to you about the lease?
No.
Okay, all right. And we'd also discussed, and just to challenge you a little bit on some of your comments, two of New Zealand's biggest and most successful tennis clubs actually embrace their neighbourhoods right next to them. Parnell and Remuera are two of them. So they get plenty of tennis balls, and they, but they actually embrace their community. Why does the Manawatu Tennis Club need to be that a little bit more separate?
We don't need to be separate. We are part of that community. We currently exist very well within that template. There are residential properties opposite on Fitzherbert Avenue. There's the school next to us. There's a range of other facilities. So we already exist very well within that community. If you build a property right next to the tennis court with lights shining into somebody's bathroom, I suspect there'll be complaints and some problem. So I think it's around the design and how you design that facility so that we can work in well with the community. So yeah, I agree with you. We definitely want to work in the community. We already exist very well within that community. And I think one of the potentials going forward, again, there's been mention of Girls High. So again, partnership with Girl High to enhance. They're already on a limited footprint. This provides an opportunity for greater use for them. There are other sporting organisations close to us. Cricket, for example, the YMCA. Again, it provides us potential. And I guess going forward, multi-use facilities is definitely the way forward. We've got one of the New Zealand's best in terms of the arena. We need to be looking as a council at multi-use recreation facilities, supporting the tennis club to grow, and providing certainty around that tennis club. For example, we currently need to replace 5 of our courts. If we were to apply for funding at the moment with a short-term lease, that might be challenging for us to get. So as I said, we're keen for a long-term lease. We're keen to work with the council on how we can enhance the recreation facilities and partner with potentially other sporting organisations to enhance the footprint that we have. We're a fantastic city in terms of sport. We're sports central, and we need as a city to be promoting that. And I think we have the potential with this, one of the options here, to make sure that we have enhanced recreation facilities within the city.
So you've probably answered just one further question, Madam Chair. So your biggest issue is the lease and the uncertainty or the lack of tenure on that lease. Is that the biggest issue?
Yep. So definitely, but also the potential for us to grow.
Yeah. Okay.
So if all of that land is used for commercial property, and we have a wall next to ours, we are limited, as are Girls High, as are other facilities there. The potential there is to use part of that land for recreation facilities and offset the cost of that through the building of some other facilities. So I think there's a win-win here in terms of the council and providing enhanced recreation facilities.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Harpera.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your submission. Just going on from some of those threads that you were bringing up, have you had any discussions with any other codes going forward on any of this vision?
Yep, we have. We've got netball over in the corner there. So again, an indoor facility that obviously the surface is key, that now allows multi-use, but there are now indoor turfs or indoor facilities that allow multi-use to occur. So I think this is really important for a club to be able to grow and provide financial sustainability for a club. We are a good club. We're the best club in New Zealand currently. How can we get better and enhance the city in terms of a bigger footprint for sport? We are one of the best in the world, actually. We just need to promote it a bit more.
So second question would be about fundraising for that in this environment. how would you see yourself doing that?
So I think the proposal allows some, if you build some commercial facilities, that fundraising from that commercial would offset the funding that would enable these recreation facilities. So I see it as a win-win, that the council's providing recreation facilities and is able to offset the funding of that by raising money through commercial facilities. So I think there's a win-win there as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Andy. Nice T-shirt. Congratulations on being New Zealand Club of the Year. My question, I suppose, follows on from the Mayor's question. Rather than the risks of the current proposal, what opportunities would you see if there was increased urban density around the tennis club? Are there any opportunities in that for you?
Opportunities for the tennis club? Well, some of our tenants thought that, some of our club members thought they might buy one of the properties actually next, and then they just have to walk to the, a bit of an easy walk. So that's certainly an opportunity. Some of us are getting a little bit older, so a sort of retirement village for tennis players would be ideal. So I think, as Grant pointed out, we do work really well with the community, and I think there's potential there to make sure the current design, I think, would be problematic. A revised design that enables commercial, however it's termed, facilities alongside a recreation facility that's multi-use, that can be used for girls' high, netball, and maybe other codes, I think is a win-win for the community and potentially for the council.
I'll leave it there because the red light is flashing. Thank you.
Last questions, Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Andy, what's the size of your club and what's the trend of membership been in the last 5 years?
Yep, so the trend is up. We're over 200 members, which is increasing. We have some of the best tennis players in New Zealand currently. So Connor Heap is in the top 10 in New Zealand. We have some really good tennis players up at Massey. As you know, Massey supports Academy of Sport, has Academy of Sport, so supporting top athletes to come to Palmerston North. Oh, time's up. So yeah, we are a growing club. We are the best club in New Zealand. We are looking for us to develop that. And I guess one of the other benefits of a club, of the sport of tennis, is it's actually a family club. We have kids, we have males, we have females. So actually it's a club for everybody. So it's not a single sex sport. It's a family sport. So I think in terms of community, it's one of the best sports that the council could support.
Thank you, Andy. That concludes your submission time this morning. Our next submission is number 75, Palmerston North Girls High School.
Thank you, Madam Chair, elected members, staff. My name's Troy Gerbich. I'm the business manager at Palmerston North Girls High School. Here with me two board members, Joe Rata and Kim Penny, and we thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, I guess Palmerston North Girls High School could be seen as maybe one of the largest neighbours to the proposal, and as such, we feel like we've got a fairly strong vested interest. But more so, I think we feel that we're actually very clear about some of the safety goings on around this site, because we witness it daily, weekly, annually. We're there all the time, about 1,500 of us, and so that we find that we are often the eyes and the ears of the New Zealand Police, of the council, of all of the service representatives that actually support that area and space. So just wanted to, so a bit of context behind some of our concerns. Certainly you'll see from our submission, they come certainly from a health and safety perspective, from observations that we address on a daily basis. And so therefore, put a little bit of context to some of our concerns for you. So the school is opposed to option one. We do not believe that the condensed residential housing is suitable on this site. We have over the last few years been having to address issues around the school, in particular with high traffic, prone to pedestrian near misses. I mean, under current health and safety and work safe rules and laws, we as an organisation have to record and document such events. We patrol Park Road every morning. We have staff out there. We have students, our customers, that come across the street. We have been lobbying for years and were successful last year in establishing a care crossing on Park Road, because we had many near misses and a few unfortunate incidences with staff and with students. And this is one of the reasons that we do have a concern around the prospect that having a larger number of vehicles in that a small space coming in and out of that area is going to make that worse. We also believe that having an increased residential population in this built-up area next to the school, selfishly or not, we do believe that there is going to be the temptation for increased members of the public to enter the school site. Some people see the school site as a public site. It's not. It's there for the students and the staff, and it's going to, we believe that it's going to increase necessity to monitor security, to put cameras where there are no cameras, for us to increase our monitoring of that space and that site so close to our grounds. We unashamedly boast a very clean and almost graffiti-free and damage-free site at the moment. We have a really good system in place with security and our caretaker. Our caretaker in the school house is right adjacent and over the fence from the proposed site. We consider option 3 for development for recreational purposes, that we don't have a vested interest in the development of that for as a recreational park. So we are neutral on that in that sense. Option 4, though, we do consider probably to be our preference. I agree with some of the many of the other submitters that we believe that there's a further discussion in the community to be had on this. There's further input to be gained, wisdom, great ideas to be gathered by the council. In particular, we would like to see some input from iwi on this. And we also, I guess, some of the questions that I've seen from some of the elected members have said, well, actually, what would you want to do with it if it is your idea, if you had a chance to actually do it yourself? Well, I guess, again, selfishly, we would see it as an opportunity to maybe take some of the heavier traffic off the main arterial route. We've also heard that it's a very high bus route. Maybe it could be an opportunity to create a space where some of those buses could come off the main Fitzherbert and people could actually get off there safely or safer than what they do now. We do find that Fitzherbert Ave in particular, with the buses and the large number of students, even with the pedestrian crossing, we had a car tipped upside down on the pedestrian crossing on a straight piece of road the other night. How does that happen? I don't know, but it does. That area of intersection between Te Awi and Park Road, and on that whole corner, we just got to look at some of the vehicle stats. There's people doing stupid things in there, and unfortunately that area, this proposal is right slap bang in the middle of it. The idea of increasing, promoting or having more residents with more vehicles in that space, to us just doesn't seem logical. Option 5, the school is opposed to the sale or development for commercial purposes. I mean, as a state sector school, we can't enter into commercial considerations with council. We're not funded that way. As Worship and I've had a conversation a couple of years ago around the potential for the school to be buying sites and the site, or we aren't funded that way. It's the ministry would be the ones that would be making those suggestions on our behalf, but as a school and as a board, we aren't funded to buy property at that level of value in particular. Did offer them $1 for it, I think. The offer still stands. So yeah, the commercial purposes, again, we would be concerned that we would have no ability to control what type of commercial activity would be on there. And I guess I don't need to tell you what you already know, and that's that if you were in charge of a school of young teenage ladies, you would have some concerns as to what commercial activity was going to be propped up next to your school. And so, yeah, we would have concerns along those lines around what ability we had to I guess vet or consider what type of commercial activity would be sensible. We agree with previous submitters. There's no need for more service stations. We have a hard enough time getting the girls back from BP, getting their coffee and donuts now. So, yeah, we think that the most sensible solution at the moment would be to re-engage the community with some better options and actually seek some time to be able to allow that to happen. And I believe in this city as well. I believe that we've got a very creative city, and I believe that we've got an invested city. And so I think the people need to come back with some better suggestions than what's been proposed.
Thank you. We do have a few questions, starting with Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Troy, for your presentation and your submission. I have a couple of questions, but first, for context and background, roll number, zone. What's your current roll number? How big is the zone that the school serves?
Well, yeah, the roll number, we're actually at max, probably around 1260 at the moment. In terms of zones, it's kind of smokes and mirrors with Awatapu just around the corner. The zone is, I could tell you because of the way that Summerhill is expanding out at the moment, if you looked onto the website, the zone is just is not commensurate with the space that we actually have. We are tapped out every year with enrolments. We don't have capacity to take on more, where we have to contemplate ballots every year. One of the submissions around putting additional residentials there and what pressure in our ministry's response, if you're referring to the response that the ministry's made around roll, we don't have capacity to take on additional. But then, of course, if it's in zone, then, we're kind of forced to take the in zoners, and then some are, all schools and us included would take out a zone as a secondary preference, of course.
So with being tapped out, if the increased urban density, taking Huia Street aside, this is the trend towards increased urban density, which is on your doorstep. What does that mean? You would look to reduce your zone?
We don't get to make that choice. The ministry make that choice for us. And unfortunately, because of the way that, well, not unfortunately, but the way that urban density is increasing, it's kind of out of our hands. We have a school with a particular footprint. That footprint is unable to grow. We are unable to place additional buildings on our site. And we have not got approval from the ministry to buy the land. We've asked them the question. And whilst there are other secondary schools in other areas of the city that are not at capacity, then we are kind of landlocked in the respect of both enrolments and in our ability to do stuff with infrastructure and buildings and land.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there are other questions.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Troy, and to the Board of Trustee members as well. You talked about traffic being a really big issue and barrier to just basically anything happening there, full stop. And I understand the issues there. It's currently, and I say the word currently, an arterial route, but you do know that there is, and that's what we're lobbying the government for at the moment around the ring road, to take that traffic off that road. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of it, but in relation to the submission, I can only give you the facts on what we know, and so presented with the facts, this is what we're experiencing now. Yep. Looking at the fact that 10 years ago, council saw that the sense of not making Huia Street a one-way right through and to create another crossing onto Linton Street was obviously they knew that that was going to create congestion and traffic at that point as well. I made that point in the submission. To bring in two other inside that corner, two other access points into that land kind of says to me, well, you've just created the same problem that you didn't want to do 10 years ago. So whether a ring road is going to take away all of that, I don't know whether any of us would be certain.
Well, sure, it won't get funded otherwise. I mean, we'll take currently you've got Fonterra milk tankers going right past your front door. You've got logging trucks going to the log.
Is this a question?
Yeah, but we'll respond too. Yeah, so I think it will.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming in and speaking to us this morning. The view that you've expressed in your submission and here today, I'm assuming you have sought the views of the wider school community to come to that view, but it would be really interesting to have an understanding of how widely you have spoken to people and whether there was a variety of views or whether that was really how you came to the view that you've expressed today. It would be good to have an understanding.
I'll just ask if you could answer the question as in the short form as possible.
The board responded to the submission on behalf of the school community.
Thank you, that's good to know.
Thank you very much. Your time for your submission has come to an end, but we appreciate you coming in this morning. We are going to take a short break, so we will be back here at We'll be back at 5 to 11.